Let's build a drag and drop to-do list with React. Here's what our final product will look like. You can add, delete, and drag and drop a to-do. Implementing this is easy, even the drag and drop, which makes this the perfect first project. I'll show you how it's done. First thing we need to do is build a React app from scratch. So visit the link down below and we can install a build tool Vite. So just copy paste this command, replace my app with our app name, so to-do list, and it'll give us a lot of these files here. So we have source directory, we have assets in there, just a React icon, and our app CSS and app JSX. So let's cd into our new directory, and then we run npm install for our dependencies. After a bit of waiting, we can clear our terminal and we can run the very fast local dev environment. So just visit this to see what our app looks like at the moment. And there it is. Okay, let's do some cleanup with our files. Let's delete all of the CSS from app.css. You could see it changed the layout and the styling there. Let's remove everything from app.jsx and just return null for the time being. Remove all those imports that we don't need, and you can see we're effectively starting from scratch. We'll be keeping the main.jsx file and the index.css file. We'll be mainly editing the app.jsx and CSS file, and we'll be adding some new files as well. Okay, the first thing we need to do is to make a to-do input component. So we'll make a new folder here for our components, and inside that, let's make a file to-do input.jsx. So let's make the to-do input component. And return just a div for now, and the input inside it, just a blank one, and the button for submitting the new task, the new to-do. And let's use state to store this task. So new task and set new task, use state with empty string just for the initial state. We need to import useState from React. Now let's save it, and notice how it auto formats using prettier. And now let's go back to app.jsx and let's return it. Of course, we haven't exported it yet. Let's do that. Export default to do input, and now what happens is when we type it, we can automatically import it just like that. And you can see it's right here. Let's change a few things on the input element so it's not sort of plain. So type text and the placeholder, go grocery shopping. And the on change, which occurs after every character you type. So we take the event E and we use the set state function, set new task, and we set it to whatever you typed. So e.target.value. Finally, the value prop is the state there, so the new task. Let's type in get Pokemon cards. Add doesn't work because our button doesn't have an on-click function. So let's add that. Let's just add a console log to verify the new task is working as expected. Now let's open the DevTools with inspect, console tab, and now let's click add. And there it is, our new task right there. Let's do some quick CSS just to add some spacing between the input bar and the add button, and also to make the input bar the same size as the add button. Okay, class name to do input, Then over to the CSS file, let's add in a margin bottom, just because the plan is the to-do list will be underneath and we need some space between the input bar and the to-do items. Finally, the input itself, let's add the right margin and the padding to make it bigger. There it is, looking better. Now let's make the to-do list component. So in our app, let's make a title first. So h1 to-do list. This fails because React expects only one outer element. So let's add a React fragment there and put them inside, and there we go, it works. Now let's make the to-do list. So now it's not rendering because we don't actually have a to-do list component yet. So let's make one. Let's do const to-do list here and export that. So now let's import that in our app. And there we go, it's working. So right now it's just an empty component. Let's use state here to set our to-do items. Again, import useState from React. And let's just do some sample to-dos. So it'll be an array because it can have multiple items. So the first one will have an ID and a task, and is complete is false. Let's plug that into our useState. Let's render our component to return to-dos map. So for every to-do, let's return a to-do component. We haven't made that yet, but we'll do that soon. And we'll pass in to-do as the prop. So this is a one-liner. So what we can do is remove the curly brackets and the return statement and the semicolon. It is called an implicit return. Okay, let's make our to-do component now. It'll take in the to-do from that prop, and let's export it. Okay, now we return a div for the parent. And as reference, this is what our to-do looks like. There are two sections to it. So let's make the to-do task class name first. And here are the two sections. So the two sections, this would be the to-do task itself. And this is the to-do actions. So that will have the button to remove the task, and the other one will have the label and the checkbox. Let's make the checkbox first. So input, type checkbox, and checked, which determines if it's checked or not. We'll use the isComplete property on the to-do object. Okay, if we interact with it, we need an onChange function. Let's just define handle complete, and we'll pass it the to-do ID. Back at our to-do list component, let's define handle complete, and we'll pass it in here to a to-do as a prop. So handle complete is equal to handle complete, and now we consume it in our components, and we need to import our to-do in our to-do list component so it can properly render just like that. You can see the checkbox here that relates to this task here with isComplete false with an ID of 1 and isComplete is false. So if you change that to true and reload the page, you could see the checkbox is ticked. Okay, let's render the task label as well. So let's add a label element here, and it has the to-do.task, and that's displayed. And if it's complete, we want a line through effect, and we want it to blend in with the background more. So we add a style text decoration. If it's complete, then make it a line through, otherwise empty. And opacity, if it's complete, make it a little bit less, otherwise it's 1. So now you can see if it's complete, it's struck out with a line through and the opacity is 0.5. If it's not complete, it's back to normal. So if we try to click on the checkbox, it's not doing anything because right now handle complete does nothing. So let's do the logic right now. It's pretty simple. So we just use set to dos and we get the previous to dos. We're taking in the ID. Remember, from the to do, we're passing in the to do ID. So we'll be using the ID here. And previous to dos map, we're returning that. And for each to do, if to do ID is equal to the ID that we passed in, then that means we want to complete it. So we return the existing to do, and is complete, we will make that the opposite of the current value. Otherwise, we just return to do. Okay, let's try that out. Perfect, it's working. Let's add some functionality for deleting a to do. So you pass in the ID that we want to delete. We use our set state function, get the previous to dos, and we use the JavaScript filter function on this array. So what this does now is it filters out, well, it removes everything except for the ID that we pass in. This is the ID that we want to remove. So that's not what we want. So we need to negate it. Just like that. So now it'll keep every to do except for the one we are deleting. We pass in handle delete to the to do component. And here, let's make a button for deleting. Just use the trash can emoji and assign a on-click function. Handle delete, passing in the ID. You can see the trash can right here. Let's align the delete button with the task label. So here we take in the parent component, the to-do item. Should be to-do item there. So here we have the task and the actions, and we want both of them to be on the same line. We can do that in CSS using display flex, justify content, just add some space between them, and vertically align them. Okay, let's click on the button. Boom, it deletes it. Perfect. Let's add functionality for adding a new task. So in the to-do input, we have a button that only console logs the new task. In the add function, let's define our handle add function. Takes in the new task. And here we use set to dos, but it's not defined here. It's defined in to-do list. So we'll move it from to-do list to its parent app. Also move the sample to-dos and the import statement as well. Perfect. So now in to-do list, we'll pass in the to-dos and the set to-dos. Of course, in the app, we need to set those as props to to-do list as well. Here we add in the handle add function as a prop to the to-do input, and we pass in to-dos and set to-dos as props to the to-do list. Let's add the functionality for adding a to-do. So here we take in the previous to-dos, and then we add a new to-do. So it'll be an object in this format here. So ID task is complete. So task, we get that from the input, new task. And is complete is always going to be false. And ID, it's a bit more complicated, but we can set up a global variable. So we have one to do, which has an ID of 1. And every time we add a new task, it'll increment the ID variable. So right now it's 1. It'll be incremented when we add a new task. So the next one will be 2. And the next one will be 3, and 4, and so on. Back to the to-do input. Our on-click is only console logging the new tasks that we get. Let's get the handle add and replace the console log with handle add. Now we can add new to-dos. Something that might have annoyed you is the to-do list is on the left side of the page. It should be on the center of the page. Index CSS has place items here. Just replace that with justify content center and align items center. There we go. Notice this interaction where we add go grocery shopping. When we click on the add button, it'll still stay there in the input bar. We want to clear it every time we add a new to-do. Pretty simple. We just set the new task to be empty. And now, let's reload the page, go grocery shopping, add the new task, and it'll be empty. Let's try to add by using the enter key. We can't do it. So, in the input bar, we can add an on key down. So for the event, if the key is equal to the enter key, then we call handle add and we set the new task to be empty. On key down where D is capitalized, and there we go. You notice we can add an empty task there. We don't want that to happen. So let's add some logic. But first, notice that there's some duplication between this and this. So we can consolidate that into a common function handle submit. Takes no parameters, and we just copy paste into this new function. And now we replace that with handle submit and also the on click on the button. Now let's add the logic. So if the user has entered anything into the input bar, then we add the task and we set a new task to be empty. So if the input bar is empty, now you can't add anything, even with spaces. However, it looks like you can still add something because the button isn't disabled. Let's just disable the button if there's nothing in the input bar. Now the button is disabled. Perfect. The final functionality is adding drag and drop. Here we use D&D kit. So we install D&D kit core, sortable, and utilities. I'll tell you quickly how D&D kit works. First, we need a D&D context component. This allows drag and drop to work. Then, we need a sortable context. This allows us to be able to sort our to-dos with drag and drop. It takes an items prop, which will contain our to-dos array. This is our to-do list component. Let's say we have 2 to-dos. Say that 5 times fast. The first to-do has an ID of 1. The second to-do has an ID of 2. These are the sortable items. In each sortable item, we have a droppable and also a draggable. The first draggable contains our to-do, which is grocery shopping. We can drag the to-do and drop it on a droppable component. It might seem complicated at first, but it's not so hard in code. Let's set it up. First, we need to set up D&D context. So let's import it from D&D kit core. And we return it in our to-do list components. And we put everything that we want to be able to drag and drop inside D&D context. So this includes our to-dos because the to-dos we want to drag and drop. Similar to D&D context, we need to set up sortable context. This allows us to sort our to-dos, import it from D&D kit sortable, and put it inside of D&D context, and put our to-dos inside it. Remember, it takes in an items prop, which will be our to-dos. D&D context needs a few props. The onDragEnd function. This is a function that fires after the drag and drop interaction has finished. So after a draggable item has been dropped, it will fire. Let's make an empty handle drag end function for now. Another prop is sensors, which detects input methods to start dragging, like dragging by mouse or by keyboard. They are handled by D&D kit, so you don't have to know about them too much. So we declare a variable sensors. We use the use sensors hook given to us by D&D kit core, and we pass in two sensors here. We import use sensor. Here is the first sensor, pointer sensor, and the second one, keyboard sensor. So you use the use sensor, pointer sensor, and again, use sensor, keyboard sensor. In the keyboard sensor's case, we pass in an options object with coordinate getter that has a value sortable keyboard coordinates, as it's recommended by D&D kit. Again, you don't have to know about these too much. You just have to know that this is the sensor for using the mouse, and this is the sensor for using the keyboard. The last prop is collision detection, which detects collisions between draggable and droppable areas. D&D kit recommends the closest center algorithm for sortable lists, like our to-do list. Now let's do the props for sortable contexts. The easiest one is the strategy prop. Once again, for vertical lists like our to-do list, D&D kit recommends the vertical list sorting strategy. So let's use that. Okay, we got our context set up. The next step is to make our to-do components sortable. Let's rename it to sortable to-do and create a new file. Remember to import the new sortable to-do instead of to-do. Let's add a key to the sortable to-do. In our component, let's import our to-do. This sortable to-do component will handle all of the logic needed to make the to-do a draggable object. It's a great idea to separate this draggable logic from the to-do component logic, like handle complete and handle remove. Remember, we are passing in the key, the to-do, handle complete, and handle delete props. We can pass these props to the to-do component by using the spread operator. Let's get these variables: attributes, listeners, setNodeRef, transform, transition. We get them from the custom hook useSortable, which takes in an ID, which we can use the ID of our to-do. We could do props.key or props.todo.id, either works. Let's import it, of course. A quick explanation of the variables. setNodeRef, you attach it to the element you want to make draggable. Listeners, these are the drag event handlers, like when the user clicks and drags. Attributes, these are for accessibility. Transform, this tells us how far the item is moving during drag, like X and Y pixel values. Transition, this gives us a smooth animation when the item is dragging. Let's wrap our to-do with a div. This div, we want to make it into the draggable element, so we assign setNodeRef to it. Add the attributes to the div. Let's make a style object which will contain the transition. It'll need a transform property. We can use the translate 3D CSS property for this, which takes in the X value from transform.x in pixels, the Y, and 0 for Z, because we're not using a 3D space, only 2D. You can do that, or we can use the handy CSS utility, which will do this for us. Now attach the style to the div, and attach the listeners too. Now look, we can drag our to-do. However, interacting with the checkbox doesn't quite work. See, look, I'm trying to check it, but it's not checking. And also, trying to delete it doesn't work either. This is because our div is interfering with our to-do component. To fix that, let's have a separate drag handle. Let's use a span here. Use the drag icon and give it a class name of drag handle. So there it is, it's on top, but we want it to be to the left of the to-do. We can do that with CSS, make the position absolute, adjust the opacity. We change the left property, so it's to the left. Since it's absolute, we need to make the parent have the position relative. Let's adjust the padding a little bit. 8 pixels should be fine. So now it's roughly in line. Let's add a cursor pointer so it looks like we're selecting it when you drag on it. And now let's move the listener to our span here. And now we can interact with the to-do and it works as expected. Let's try the delete button. Deletes it perfectly. Let's reload. Let's add another to-do. You can see the transition happening here. However, we can't sort it yet because we haven't done the handle on drag end function. That will be our last step. This is, by the way, what happens if you don't have the transition property. It looks like it's just really choppy. And the transform, you don't even know where you're dragging. So these two are needed for the drag and drop animation to look smooth. Let's go back to our to-do list component. We have a handle drag end function here. It's empty at the moment, but let's code it up. It takes in an active and an over. So active is what you're dragging at the moment, and over is where you're going to drop it. So buy Pokemon cards is active, and you're dragging it over go grocery shopping. If the active is buy Pokemon cards and dropping over buy Pokemon cards, you're not really moving it, right? Therefore, we don't need any logic for that. We only have logic for when the active is over something else. So here we reorder. We use our set to-dos function, take in our previous to-dos, or just to-dos in this case. First, we find the old index or the original index of our to-do. And we find where we dropped it, so the new index. Then, we use the handy array move utility function provided by D&D Kit. Basically takes in the array, to-dos, the old index, and the new index. Pretty simple. Let's try it out. There it is, working perfectly. You can add in more to-dos, and it works perfect. Congratulations guys, you've finished your to-do list with drag and drop. Thanks for watching. Please leave comments on any projects you want to see next. Appreciate you guys. Goodbye.